KCSE from the website of the examinations body. You have the story on page 2, and also top schools nationally listed here as well, just as we saw it on the front page of the Standard. You can grab a copy, and it continues on page 3 as well. Speeding to blame for crash that claimed 15, says witnesses. The scene of yesterday's morning's accident involving a matatu and a bus on the Nakuru-Eldoret highway, which claimed 15 lives, has been described as straight from a horror movie. According to preliminary reports, the driver of the matatu was speeding and overtaking prior to the accident. It is alleged that the driver was competing with another matatu. You have the story on page 12 of the Daily Nation. MPs in threat to impeach Ndungu over CDF delays. Drawn from both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio coalition, they said learners from poor families who depend on bursaries to pay fees risk being turned away from schools. You have the story on page 11 of the Daily Nation this morning. And 6 students stuck in India as Edu Afia cover dries up for 2 months now. Tofista, her daughter Rachel, and her son have been in India to seek medical attention at the Sanara International Hospital. She was assured that the Edu Afia medical scheme will cater for her treatment cost, but she's now in distress. You have a story on page 14 of the Daily Nation. NHC on the spot over 3.2 billion shillings in sold houses. Agency faulted for failing to provide an inventory. And you can follow the story on the back page of the Daily Nation today. Ruto renews feud with the judiciary over projects. President vows he will deal with corrupt judges. You have the story on page 11 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also, murder. Is Mwangaza a victim of police probe? That is a probing question on the front page of the Star. And you have the flagger reading probe. Meru governor and her husband have denied involvement in sniper's death. 9 of the governor's close associates, including her brother, are in lawful custody. You have the story on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. The Star shines brighter with weekly free issue. That is also a picture there, pictorial that has been given. You can follow the story inside as well. Ruto, I will never bribe judges for favorable court decisions. That story on page 7 of the Star this morning. Let's see what the People Daily is holding for us, and this is what you're waking up to on the front page of the People Daily. Mystery over 7,000 missing candidates. That is a splash this morning. KCSE exams, 9,000 students registered for examinations and disappeared, only for 2,000 to turn up for test after crackdown. So, where are the rest? That is a probing question there. You have a story on page 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the People Daily this morning. And you can see the devastation, the wreckage there of the collision that was there yesterday. And we had 15 perishing, 40 injured in morning accident. Police officers examining the wreckage of Northways shuttle that collided with Classic King of Congo, a bus at Twin Bridge area in MoH Summit on Nakuru-Eldoret highway, killing all the 15 passengers in the matatu at the crack of dawn on Tuesday. Follow the story on page 7 of the People Daily this morning. M-Pesa outage causes scare, and also Raila Wanjigi meeting raises eyebrows. Azimio leader Raila Odinga with the businessman Jimmy Wanjigi after, it can be seen here, after they held private talks at Nairobi Hotel yesterday. So what is up their collective sleeves? What is in the offing? Are they to work together? We shall also run you by that story much later in the course of the program. Miamba wapya, that is a splash. Shule ndogo zatia fora katika KCSE, huku zikitoa ushindani mkali kwa majabali wenye uwezo mkubwa. You can follow the story inside Taifa Leo. Also, the listing is there, top ranking schools are all splashed there on the front page of Taifa Leo, and you can see related pictures of them that also performed well being celebrated. That is Taifa Leo. Wabunge wataka kumng'oa Ndungu. That is another story on page 3. Serikali ya Raila na Wanjigi on page 5 of Taifa Leo. We buckle down to business winners and losers from the shillings record fall, windfall for exporters, experts, remittance recipients, pain for importers, dollar borrowers, overseas students. You have a story there on page 2 of the Business Daily. Expatriates Kenyans will, with foreign currency denominated salaries, exporters and recipients of diaspora remittances have marked a significant windfall from the weakening of the shilling against major world currencies. The story continues on page 2 of the Business Daily. Kenya's economy to grow 5.2% this year, says World Bank. And you have a story on page 2. Nairobi, Kilifi top counties in piped water coverage. Also Bank of Africa to expand lending to MSMEs, and bank stock tipped to rise on dividends. Earnings growth, that is on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. The government has indicated that it will focus on enhancing tax expenditures that promote investments. That story also on page 9 of the Business Daily. We cross over to Uganda, where billions paid to ghost workers is a revelation that an audit is revealing there. According to the new audit, you can read all about it. We can see here Auditor General John Mwanga yesterday released his annual report on how taxpayers' money was spent in the 2022-2023 financial year. That story continues on page 4 of the Daily Monitor. Travelers to Kenya from EAC states to no visa fate in June. Travelers to Kenya from EAC states to no visa fate in June. Kenya yesterday told this publication, that is the Daily Monitor, that they will announce updates on how member states will access Kenya after 6 months. That story continues on page 7. And also there has been confusion in regard to the latest visa-free entry into the country with the charges that are and the frustrations that some of the tourists have been expressing. We shall be looking at that as well much later in the course of the program. This is the Daily Monitor. NRM DP to review Cooperation Pact, and Mpuga out. Senjonyi in at helm of opposition seat. All that inside the Daily Monitor. Katanga widow unable to leave hospital to record statement. That is a story you can follow on page 9 of the Daily Monitor. In Tanzania, government proposes fresh foreign policy revision. The government yesterday proposed 6 key revisions to its foreign policy, including the introduction of new perspectives on economic diplomacy, the blue economy, and the global promotion of Kiswahili. The global promotion of Kiswahili. You have the story on page 3 of the Citizen. And East Africa to back trend of global slowdown in 2024. This is according to World Bank. You can read all about it inside the East African this morning. TPA revealing ambitious plan to boost efficiency capacity. Also, we have the New Times in Rwanda. 5 new e-commerce trends for local players. It's another story you can follow inside the New Times. E-commerce growth is a unique opportunity to open access to local and international markets. That story continues on page 3 of the New Times. Rubavu injects 600 million Rwandan francs into Gisenyi market. And United Nations official denounces rising hate speech in eastern DR Congo. That story on page 4 of the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda this morning. And the East African, why Uganda, Kenya fallouts may not last. They're important trading partners in spite of spats, and their divorce will impact intra-EAC trade. Besides, Kampala's options may prove more expensive. You have the story on page 7 of the East African this week. And also Somalia round with Ethiopia could shake East Africa. It remains to be seen how it will play in 9 upstream states as Mogadishu allies join in. And Sudan recalls the Nairobi envoy, shuttle diplomacy by paramilitary leader. Amid it, rattles Khartoum, divides opinion on peace bid. And that story is on page 6 and 10 of East African this week. Let's see what we have finally on China Daily. China's agenda for diplomacy set for 2024. Nation to enhance friendship, mutual trust, integration with neighbors. This is what the Foreign Minister Wang says. An economy on track for solid recovery, more relaxation of policy expected. You can read all about it inside today's copy of the China Daily. Japan's U.S. defense budget don't bode well. That is another story also tucked away inside the China Daily. On World Watch there by Imran Khalid. That story on page 3 it continues. That is the China Daily. All right, that's enough for the dailies right now. I shall be running you by some of the other international publications on the split screen when we continue with the conversation with our panelists this morning. Allow me to introduce to you our panelists this morning, fresh this year. We're holding court this morning with Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director of the Horn Institute. And also we're holding court this morning with Professor Peter Kibwanja, who is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute. We have with us as well Irungu Houghton, who is the executive director. Irungu Houghton, All right, you know, I've purposed this year to actually to say it well. You know, Houghton, who is the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. We have also Mheshimiwa Yusuf Hassan, who is a Member of Parliament Kamkunji, and also who is a committee member on, of course, foreign relations and diplomacy and defense at the National Assembly. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning.
Right, and a hearty welcome to 2024. I haven't seen you on this other side of the year, but it's good to see you this morning. So maybe we can just get introductory remarks. How was the crossover on a lighter moment there? Wishing Kenyans also happy felicitations for this good year as well. Can begin with Dr. Hassan Kaneje.
Good morning, Dival. Good morning, Kenyans. Happy New Year. It's amazing how fast, years can wrap up. Just the other day, we were coming from a transition, and now it's almost a year and a half down the line. Hoping that Kenyans are going to remain hopeful like me, despite the ongoing challenges, and especially within our region and within our country, economically, especially as well as diplomatically and security-wise. Things seem to be getting complicated, but we expect that as Kenya, being an important anchor state in this region, that we're going to contribute in providing direction so that the region doesn't implode, but so that we can also work on our domestic issues to ensure that there's going to be less pain for Kenyans in 2024 than it was in 2023.
Indeed. Right. Let's hear from Professor Peter Kagwanja. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this invite this new year, and happy new year to my colleagues as well, and to our viewers out there. 2023 was a very difficult year in many ways. I predicted in my article that 2024 is even going to be harder than that. I think the difference will be that the 2023 helped Kenyans to develop some shock absorbers so that they're now better prepared to deal with hardship than they were in 2023. I think that will make a huge difference. And in that regard, therefore, the best we can do is to make 2024 a better year. It is possible for us to make it a better year by focusing on what we need to do. The region, as has been indicated by my colleague, is going through a very rough patch. I don't think there is a single country in the Horn, except possibly Kenya and Tanzania, that you can say, and Uganda, that you can say are stable. The situation in Sudan is bad. The situation in Somaliland and Ethiopia, the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea is back to the brink. The relationship between Somalia and Ethiopia is perhaps at its worst since the Ogaden War in 1970s. And therefore Kenya specifically has a hard task to prove its worth as a regional power. And that is our greatest challenge as a country.
Right, and Huto.
So good morning to Kenyans and to all the people that watch this show. Special greetings to David Ogara, who is in Kazakhstan. I think he's back in his school. He's a Kenyan. He's been working abroad for about 20 years. We bumped into each other with our children somewhere in Kitengela on water slides, and he said he's a fan of you, particularly Debal, and secondarily us, and that he watches this show religiously. So I just want to send a message out to him of Happy New Year, and to all those Kenyans who watch us outside the borders of Kenya. I think I like the comments that have been said. The year is predictably going to be as tough as 2023, but the difference is we have the experience of 2023 to make different choices. So the context may be arduous, but I think even at a personal level, we have the opportunity now to make new choices in 2024. And then maybe just last to say, I know it's January because I'm back in the gym. So that's how
the festivities,
it doesn't usually last longer than January, so there's a bet on with my family that I will go beyond this. But good morning and Happy New Year, everybody.
Fantastic. Let's hear from Yusuf Hassan as well. Good morning.
Good morning and all the best. I just want to say Happy New Year to everyone and congratulations to the students from my neighborhood who've done extremely well in the exams, and in particular MoH Forces Academy. I just want to wish them very well as they take the next step in their journey. Of course, we are in difficult times. War clouds are gathering over the Horn of Africa. Yeah. Really serious problems. We seem to be back in the problems of the 70s during the Cold War. And I think it requires a lot of engagement to make sure that, in fact, some of the countries do not fall off the edge. And in particular, Sudan, the situation in Ethiopia internally, as well as Ethiopia's relationship with Somalia, South Sudan, the eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. All of these places are really shaky. And unless we have sober minds, things could get out of hand. So I hope that we'll be able to focus on peace, security and stability, and make sure that, in fact, we settle our regional problems through political, peaceful means.
Right. Let's just also buckle down to some of the stories that we want just to navel gaze on before we proceed with what is happening in the region. Here in the country, looking at the performance that we've had so far, Kabarak has topped the national exams. I can see also in some of the dailies that, people are saying the reason that we do have the people scoring Ds, it's also how they were, nursed when in their formative years, especially during the winning period. That a lot of, this is an analysis from the Ministry of Health, that poor nutrition as well is highly contributive to, them really failing to achieve that particular, good grade, grade A, Bs and B pluses. So they're saying the fact that you were raised on porridge, a lot of you I know by then, or just carbohydrates and no enough proteins after breastfeeding, that also is contributive to what is happening currently. Do you stand with that particular view from the Minister of Health?
I mean, it's known, it's an international truth in the sense that there is data internationally that shows that actually, childhood and good parenting is the basis of good grades, right? So I don't think you expect good grades from a nation if you're only relying on schools to provide that clarity. I think there has to be a way in which children are coming through their early childhood period with the right kind of nutrition. So I don't think that's rocket science, but I appreciate the Ministry of Health reminding us that poverty is actually at the basis of lots of students who don't excel.
Right, that is in the Star today. Poor diet may be cause of these. In KCSE shows Ministry of Health analysis. So if you're taking breakfast this morning, just be cognizant of that as well. Kenyan mothers begin well. It says with impressive rates of exclusive breastfeeding of their babies until 6 months. Problem starts after 6 months when they introduce complementary foods. And this is what the Ministry of Health is saying. And its partners say most babies, 69%, are fed only mashed potatoes. We have white porridge or bananas as complementary foods. That is a big problem because they miss nutrients such as proteins, fatty acids, and macronutrients that are important for brain growth. The lack of such a diverse diet has severe irreversible consequences throughout the child's life. The ministry explains children between 6 and 23 months have greater nutrients needs per kilogram of body weight than at any other time in life, the ministry says in a paper jointly published with UNICEF and non-profit Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. You can all read the rest of the details in the Star today. And of course, they always say that between the ages of 0 to around 5, this is where we have mostly the cognitive formation of a child. So at 85%, it happens between 0 and 5 years. Beyond that, we'll always just be working with 15%. So this is very, very important. Peter, what you want to say something? Of course, in relation to the academic.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very serious topic. Perhaps more serious than we would want to consider it. History, forget about science. History has it that the protein-heavy, diet countries are the ones that performs well. If you look at Japan, you look at China, you look at Britain and others, these are, marine-based diets. They eat a lot of fish and vegetables from the sea, like seaweeds and so on. And when they come to the land, they go straight for what gives them vitamin, vegetables, and with the very specific ways of cooking them. You are told that a Japanese chef, it will take about 20 to 25 years to train a chef. I don't think you need that amount of time to train a pilot or simply, but it tells you how serious they take the diet. Now, what that does mean? It means that you cut completely, on health expenses, absence in schools for treatment, you are not there, and therefore, consequently, the country performs better. The problem with Kenya is that we've never got into a good diagnosis of who we are. We are a post-colonial country that where the vast bulk of our population was treated to the slave diet, which is basically the ugari. I had a good conversation with the former minister for health, Beth Mugo, in one of our political meetings in Mombasa, the Kibaki Times, and I indicated to her, you compare South Africa and Kenya. In South Africa, they started enhancing the maize that is getting to the market with the vitamins. You fortify it with minerals, so that the population as a whole, with no exception, eat good food from what they access, minerals, vitamins, and so on. Now, and I think during the time of Beth Mogo, she introduced that, and that's where you start now seeing our packet, 2 kg packet of having the vitamins and minerals and so on. But still, you must recognize that maize is the poorest grain. And therefore, you are not expecting maize to produce a super thinking Kenyans. It is not like our traditional food crops, sorghum, millet, and others, which were full of minerals and so on. So we in America, I must say this, even though I'm online. In America, they don't feed corn to human beings unless when they are green. In Chicago, we used to green maize. That's common in the diet. But when it dries out, it's for the horses and others. They eat wheat and other more superior grains in terms of the nutrients. So the point here is that I think we need to go to the drawing board as a country and begin to think about the protein content of our people. How do we get the protein content? If you're a farmer, like I've been, the main difficulty you have in looking after or rearing your animals is to get the 18 to 20% content of the protein, which is required for animals. And protein is so expensive in this country. How do we make it cheaper to be affordable even to our kids as they are growing? That's why you find kids will be fed on mashed potato, bananas, possibly sweet potato. Sweet potato is getting out of that class because they have become very expensive.
White porridge.
White porridge.
From the refined
grain.
Flour, yes.
Grain. And sometimes these grains also have aflatoxin. They even contribute to weakening our bodies. So we need to go to the drawing board on our diet, and we need to produce a heavy protein diet that is affordable.
Indeed. And that's what they'll say also, our brothers from the Lake region. Oh,
yes.
They are very consummate, good in education. Their brain is, because also of the locality within the area, the accessibility to fish, of course, and all. The omega, as they said. In Japan, as you've mentioned, I think in the culture also, even chewing of your food, they say you have actually to count 30 times. Or just chewing your food. You just don't bite and swallow it. You have to chew it properly for the absorption. So it is very important, and we can try and also maybe cognate this with what maybe most of the counties are doing right now with Nairobi County, with the school feeding program. Since now this has become a very expensive affair when you want to have a protein-heavy diet in the morning or maybe throughout the day, how then will the government come in with this school feeding program so that we're not just having, a pail full of porridge and mashakura, as they normally, we have githeri there, as we used to do it in school, but also githeri is good with beans being there. It's protein heavy, but I don't know. Let's hear from Dr. Kanenje. You can reflect back from your school as well if it was.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's not just about, that this, of course, diet is one of those things. Now, one thing that is important to remember, the school feeding program can be wonderful, but if you ask me, it's not sustainable. Okay, it's not going to be any different from free milk that we were taking, even though that was extremely helpful at the time in terms of supplementing our meager diets, at the time. But majority of Kenyans don't live in cities, don't live in places where they're going to have access to free foods or even facilities to be able to make free foods. And I'm talking as a rural kid. And so every time I'm going to make my contribution, of course, I have to reflect on my background and where I'm coming from. And so kids who are largely probably in urban settings where schools may have facilities to even cook actually that food and be able to serve may perhaps profit from that. But majority of them, they are pretty poor. Now, one thing that is true is a kid with kwashiorkor marasmus, I doubt if they're actually going to find enough concentration in class. Mm-hmm. If they go to school on an empty stomach, they're not going to focus very well. If they have not slept enough, they're not going to have enough concentration. And there are a number of circumstances, of course, that go into that kind of situation. But one thing that has also not been, I think, it's not being discussed, very well. Some kids are fed on poor diet. It's not because there is no food, but because there is a lack of knowledge. You have families, even where I come from. Previously we used to have tons of mixed farming, and so there were different varieties. Right now in the North Rift, mostly we plant maize. Okay, and so that is what's going to be available. In the morning you have uji, in the afternoon you have githeri, in the evening you have ugali. You're pretty much on the same diet, you see. Yet you still have 20 acres of land, or 10. You can actually farm a whole lot of things. But what is also critical is there is no postnatal education for mothers with regard to what they need to feed to their kids to ensure they're actually healthy. They may actually have money, they may have food, but they don't know the right diet to feed them. And it's very prevalent. And you go to these young mothers and ask them, what are you feeding your kids? And you're going to be shocked that a lot of them are actually just having uji, and especially after the 6 months when they're supposed to get a variety of diets and nutrition into their diet. And so there's complete lack of education that these young mothers and new mothers, they're actually not aware that whatever they may be feeding their kids may be contributing negatively to their well-being. But there's also another aspect that is kind of larger. Solving this problem, look at the performance of these schools. You're going to realize that majority of them, especially that have done well, they also have fairly better facilities. And so this performance is also reflecting the socioeconomic status, with more rural schools actually performing a lot more poorly because they have less access to basic things. And unless we actualize the right to education to be accompanied by the facilities that are needed, even the CBC thing is actually going nowhere. And the reason is because they don't even have access to this. You see, some of us, even on this table, went to school under a tree. Yeah. And you are competing with a kid who was probably having 3 square meals plus others. And because by grace of God, somehow we managed to muddle through. And I always remind people, from my primary school, only 4 of us went to high school. Only 2 of them finished high school, and 1 of us went to college. That does not mean that those kids were actually any less smarter than I was. You see, just by chance somehow I got lucky along the way, and sometimes someone holds your hand here and there. But the truth is, the structural nature of the country still militates against the effort to ensure that you're having equal access in ways that one can ensure, kids have access to diet or have access to education. And this is now being reflected, of course, in national exams. My final note, for the longest time, there's a reason why if you came from certain regions, your entry grade to university was supposed to be a little bit different to reflect that as part of the affirmative action. Well, the truth is, there's a lot of progress that has been made because of affirmative action. However, it is not enough. There are lots of areas in this country where kids have to walk for 10 miles just to get to school. And that's one way. You know, you go to Turkana, you go to some of the northern frontier districts, you wonder, you know, whether you're actually still in Kenya. And whether when we're talking about access this and right to this and right to that, we actually mean it. There's need for more investment if we actually have to ensure that we have less Ds and we have more As in our schools.
Right, and we can see also that there's a policy shift from the ministry, or the mulling over it, since we have also the entry grade to university at C+. They're thinking of lowering it so far. Do you think then they're shifting goals? Every changes with every outcome of exams, especially for the Ministry of Education. Well, what will be informing that? But maybe you can contribute to also the DIAT bit of it, and from the National Assembly, especially the Matters Academia. Should we be shifting goals now to accommodate more students? We have also a high number of E-graders, you know, standing at 48,000 in this country. That should be a niggling worry for us as well.
Yes, I think poverty is, as has been elaborated here, is a serious problem. It's a divider. And there will always be people who are excluded, who don't have the right diet because of their limited means. And I can say that, in fact, we also need a change in our dietary behavior, given the fact that ugali or cassava or matoke are the staple diets of the African people. And some people might think that maize is indigenous to Africa. It was brought by the Portuguese from Central America to feed their forces along the East African, West African coast. And we took it because it has got a high yield, it's easy to grow, and it matures very quickly. So it was actually a lazy man's crop, if you look at it in that sense. But I think in schools, the point that the professor had emphasized now is the quality of education. The poor have low quality of education. They have teachers who are not well trained. Their schools are not well resourced, and therefore they would never perform. And that's why we have a national divide. The poor versus the rich. The rich can take their kids to the best schools. And in the urban areas, there are schools that are better resourced than the schools in rural areas. But apart from the diet, there are a significant number of kids who are not even going to school, in Turkana, in northern Kenya, who have completely fallen in between the cracks. And all that needs a major government initiative to turn things around. Finally, I don't agree with the idea of lowering the grades to satisfy some political needs, because some kids are not doing very well. And I must say that this would lower the standards. Already there is a concern about Kenya. The quality of education is going down. And if we're not careful, we will be producing illiterate kids who do not have the skills and the knowledge to survive in the real world. And we would not be competitive economically. At the moment, there's a very high regard whenever. I was recently in Djibouti, and you find a lot of Kenyans working there, and there's a very high esteem for Kenyans because of the professionalism. And that is based on the kind of education they've had. But if we become continuously a country with lower expectations, where the grades are going to be lower down in order to accommodate everyone, then obviously we're going to fail our kids and we're going to fail our country.
Indeed, right. Hilton, you wanted to contribute on that briefly. You not mentioned. I think also, I don't know if that is also within the remit of Amnesty International, but you are focusing solely on human rights. That will be a place of some NGOs like World Vision. I know they are top heavy on dietary and nutrition, especially to this far-flung areas of the country.
I mean, I think, much has been said on this. I think the child inequality is probably the thing that governments need to focus on, particularly this government that had a manifesto that talked about revamping and reforming education. It's not just the configuration of the subjects. It's not just the numbers of, the terms, moving from 844 to, 2663. It's not just that. It's about outputs and the quality of Kenyans we're producing. Are these Kenyans that are adaptable to the changing environment? Are they politically and politically conscious? Do they have a sense of civic responsibility? Are they professionally grounded in areas that the economy is growing in? These are the kind of, the broader contextual points that come from the issue of the right to food and the right to nutritional food as well. The other bigger issue, I think, from this panel's perspective, really is the issue of regional security and I guess what you say, continental food security, because we have a population across the continent of about 1.2 billion Africans. This is going to increase dramatically, 700 million in the next 10 to 20 years. We cannot rely on, crops that have essentially that are not fit for climate change, for example. As we've said, they're not nutritionally, productive enough. They're not, they don't enhance the capacities of our children, much less adults as well. So I think there has to be a shift in terms of food and agricultural policy to take care of that. And I think the area that we need to think most about is the area where there is climate stress, areas like you're saying, the arid and the semi-arid areas. I do have a sense that sometimes when we think about food and nutrition, we think very much of rural agricultural areas. But I think it's important to look at places in the informal settlements. I mean, the future of Kenya is really in urbanization. It is in the quality of our cities. It's in the quality of our towns. There is no way that communities in places like all the informal settlements across our towns will be able to produce geniuses or world leaders if they're not, if they're not being able to grow well and to be educated well.
Yes, you want to say something?
Yes, and I want to speak to, I think, the point that Mheshimiwa was trying to emphasize with regard to, lowering the entry level grade to university. And I absolutely, think that is something that will actually be ill-advised. You see, something is only valuable if it's scarce and is competitive. Now, part of the challenge we are facing today with, of course, the increased number of these is also because we decided we're going to have 100% transition. And so everybody, irrespective of whether they failed or passed, they have to move to the next grade. Then what do we expect at the end of 4 years after that? Of course, we're going to have more people also who are going to fail. Because one, you have increased number of students who are now registered for the exams. But also two, you have increased number of students who are not prepared sufficiently to undertake exams. Now, what that does is they go through a system for 8, 12 years with the competence of a 6-year-old or 10-year-old. That does not prepare our young people for the trainings that are going to be necessary to actually build an economy. And it is something that we need to go back. Are we doing this for political expediency to make us feel good that we're doing something as a country? Or do we actually have the national interest and the children's interest at heart that we need to build a population that is going to be competent, is going to be competitive, and is going to be able to take care of itself and become self-sufficient as a country? Because today as we speak, and Mheshimiwa mentioned about producing students who are not prepared, we're producing PhDs that are not worth the papers they're written on already. And these are the people who are apparently now instructing our students in the universities. No wonder we're getting students who can barely write anything, a single paragraph in actually straight language. You see, many graduates out here, masters and stuff like that, they come to your office, they're looking for a job for an internship, you give them a basic assignment in their subject, they cannot even remember a single author in their field after 4 years, and they're having good grades. And so this is the kind of thing we're producing. Now, there is already noise, in fact, something about Nigeria trying to do something about Kenyan universities and Kenyan qualifications. Can you imagine Nigeria doubting the credibility of Kenyan universities, considering, of course, its own deficiencies with regard to education system, and looking at Kenya and saying, well, perhaps you guys are actually doing worse. Of course, that is a wake-up call. And today, as we speak, it's not just Nigeria. If you start reading, you read the number of countries are now flagging Kenyan qualifications. And so I think it's something we really need to take seriously.
Indeed. Of course, we saw this also in Uganda, that some of the grades as well from Makerere University, that they should be audited. So even there, they are still raising eyebrows. Right, we want to take a short break. When we circle back, I think, Hito, you wanted to say something on that as well. We want to look at Kabarak High School. It has been on the winning trot for the second time as well. Is it about resources? Is it about fish from Lake Nakuru? I don't know. What is happening there so that we can know what is the secret? We'll hear from the headmistress and the teachers there to tell us more about MoH High School Kabarak, which ranked the best in the country, scoring a main grade score of 10.4. So when we circle back, we shall be looking at this, and we'll talk about the E-graders as well. When we're looking at heavy constituent of 48,000 E-graders compared to also other numbers last year, that is 2022, a year before that. What do we do with these E-graders? I had one of the legislators saying that in this country, when you score E, there's nowhere that you're going to go. Is that true? Right? But we'll throw this to our panelist, who will give us an indication or a direction on what to do with the E-graders as well, even if you have a son or daughter who scored an E and she's at home right now. What do you do with her? And maybe you could be scratching your head. We'll take a short break. You're watching Global Today here on Morning Prime.
KTN News. Get the whole story.
Is there a downside to big investment in Africa? Well, it's a tricky question.
But these companies are getting so much value and learning that like Africa isn't about charity or poverty, but they have really skilled, diverse talent there.
So for me, big tech is something highly controversial. I see the value of it, but I also see that Africans should stop playing second fiddle to some of these organizations and have the confidence to start building our own technology.
Kwa miaka mingi tumekuwa tegemeo kwa nchi nzima kwa habari za kuaminika. Matukio katika nyanja zote za maisha. Siasa.
Nyinyi ndio mlipiga kura.
Sisi